Yeah, you can absolutely Airbnb without owning property. And if you're watching this, you probably already knew that. It's called rental subleasing or arbitrage. And for the last 5 to 7 years, it's been the most popular way to get started when you don't want to or can't buy. And I did it myself. I built an arbitrage business up to 47 units across 3 states, and we were doing well over 6 figures a month. But I don't do arbitrage anymore. Not because it doesn't work, but because since then I found a better way. With this new model, you're not signing leases, you're not putting your own money into somebody else's property, you're not driving out to do walkthroughs, and you're definitely not managing cleaners. Now, I know how that sounds. If somebody had said to me 3 years ago, I probably would have clicked off and thought, this has got to be BS. So before I get into the model, I want to show you exactly how I got here, because the mistake I made is the same one that a lot of people watching this are about to make, and it doesn't actually have much to do with Airbnb. So let's go back a few years, November 2019. I was about 3 months away from losing my house. I couldn't make my mortgage payment, I was avoiding phone calls from the bank, and out of what was honestly desperation, I put my house up on Airbnb. And surprisingly, it took off almost immediately. People were booking my house and it was covering my mortgage, and it was even leaving a little bit over to put some profit in my pocket. And once I saw how that worked, I started looking for ways to get more properties. And in 2.5 years, I had 47 units in 3 states, cleaning crews in every market, a maintenance guy on call, a full-time person doing nothing but answering guest messages, and well over 6 figures a month coming in doing arbitrage. At that point, I had thought I'd made it. But here's what I wasn't paying enough attention to. I had to invest money into every single one of those units and run it for 12 to 18 months before I ever made a dime in profit. I needed my first month's rent, my last month's rent, my deposit, furniture, setup, photos, and then usually a couple of months of week bookings while I waited for reviews to come in. And depending on the property, that's somewhere between $8,000 and $20,000 before a guest ever even walks through the door. And I didn't have that kind of cash sitting around for 47 properties, so I built it all on credit. I used business credit cards, lines of credit, and loans that I kept telling myself the business would pay off, which meant rent and debt payments were due every single month, whether we had a great month or a terrible one. And if bookings dropped off or a market got more competitive or a city changed its rules, it changed nothing about my expenses. And then after COVID, the market shifted. It wasn't a major crash, but it was a shift that caused a major change in how you had to host. And unfortunately, I didn't catch it fast enough. And the problem is when you're leveraged that much, you don't really have a large margin for error. And of course, my landlords wanted the rent and I couldn't pay it. And so it took me 2 years to dig out of everything that happened afterwards. Now, if you're thinking of pursuing this business, here's where I want you to really pay attention. Somewhere in the middle of digging out, I sat down and I wrote out what I actually liked about the business and what I hated. The stuff that I hated was easy, and I filled up most of a page. I hated dealing with cleaners, maintenance calls, driving out to walkthroughs, buying furniture for houses I'd never live in, signing my name on leases for buildings that somebody else owned. And I hated that how fast I could grow had a lot more to do with how much cash I could get access to than how good I had gotten at any of this. Now, the other side of that page took me a little longer to figure out, because when I looked at what I actually liked about the business, it wasn't owning the furniture or having my name on a lease. I liked the cash flow. I liked solving problems. I liked taking a property that was underperforming, figuring out what was wrong, and making it more profitable. I liked creating a better experience for the guest and seeing the reviews improve because of it. And eventually, I liked building a team around me so that I wasn't the only one answering every single message, dealing with every issue, or putting out every fire myself. And that's when I realized something important. None of the parts I actually enjoyed required me to own the property, lease it, furnish it, or put thousands of dollars of my own money into it. I didn't even need to own or control the real estate. And honestly, I didn't want to become a traditional property manager either. I didn't want to build another business where I was responsible for cleaners, maintenance calls, lockouts, broken toilets, and every little operational problem that came with the property itself. What I actually wanted was to be the person helping the owner make the property perform better, to help them improve the listing, the pricing, the marketing, the guest experience, and ultimately the revenue. So to make this simple, I wanted to become more of a marketing and revenue partner than a property manager. And all I really needed were the skills that I developed to make a property perform better than the average host. And so fractional hosting was born. So here's the model. There are Airbnb owners all over the country with listings that are doing okay, but nowhere near where they actually could be doing. They're not failing, they're booked enough that when they look at their bank account, it seems fine. They inherited a house, or they bought a second place, or maybe even moved and kept the old one. Some of them set up their pricing a couple of years ago and have barely touched it since. Others are just running Airbnb suggested pricing, or worse, guessing. Fractional hosting is where you partner with that owner, you take over the pricing, guest communications, and marketing sides of the business. You grow what the property produces, and you get paid a share of the total revenue. You're not having to lease the property, you're not buying it, and you're not handling cleaning or maintenance or keys or guests calling at 2 o'clock in the morning about the Wi-Fi, which means it costs you close to nothing to start a partnership, and your only real expense is your time. There's no rent coming off the top and no furniture bills, so most of what you collect actually stays in your pocket. And just to be clear, this is way different from traditional co-hosting. A co-host is usually charging a percentage of everything to handle the full day-to-day operations. And most co-hosts don't even have the skills necessary to properly optimize and actually produce top-tier revenue results for their owners. Now, real quick, before I get into why an owner would actually hand this over, if you want the fundamentals underneath all of it, what actually makes a property perform, which markets are worth looking at, what kind of properties to go after, I put all that into a free course and linked it in the description below. Go grab it now so you don't forget about it later. All right, let's get back to it. Now, the obvious question, why would an owner pay me 15% or more of their revenue? Well, it depends on the owner. And really, there's two major conversations we find ourselves having. The first one is with an owner who's already paying somebody, a co-host, a revenue manager, a property management company. That owner has already accepted that a percentage of that property's revenue will go to somebody else who helps them run it. So in this scenario, you're not asking them to spend money that they weren't already spending. You're just asking them to move it. And that's where the number does the work. Across the hosts that we've worked with, we've measured an average revenue increase of more than 18.68%. So if that property owner is already paying 15% today and they move that 15% over to you and the property starts producing 18% more, they're keeping a meaningfully amount of more revenue than they were before. They have the same fee and the same amount of their own effort. They just get more revenue in their pocket. Now, the second conversation is with an owner who's running it themselves right now and paying nobody. And I want to be straightforward about this one because the math is a little different here. If they're doing it all themselves right now and they're doing a decent job, adding a fee and adding 18% revenue lands them in roughly the same place financially. So for that owner, the money isn't the pitch. Getting their nights and their weekends back is the pitch. They stop watching their calendar, they stop second guessing their rate, they stop adjusting pricing on a Sunday afternoon, and they end up with about the same amount of money as before. For most owners, that's an easy yes. Now, if you're wondering where to even start looking, one of the easiest conversations to open is actually a property with a very high occupancy rate, which means that their calendar is completely full. And at first you might think, these people don't need my help. But here's the problem. If a listing is sitting at 95% occupancy, that's often a sign that their nightly rate is way too low. It's not solid proof, but it's worth investigating, and the owner is usually looking at that full calendar thinking that things are going great. And it's a pretty easy conversation because you can pull up actual comparable properties and show them. Now, let me show you what this looks like on an actual property. Say a listing is doing $60,000 a year, and the owner is paying a co-host 15% to help run it. That's $9,000 a year going out the door, so the owner is keeping $51,000. You take over the revenue side at that same 15%, and if the property does 18% more, it's now producing about $71,000. Your fee on that is a little under $11,000, and the owner, after paying you, is keeping just over $60,000. Now stay with me. So they went from 51 to 60, about $9,500 more in their pocket at the same fee percentage they're already paying without changing anything on their end. That's the whole pitch in one number. They're not paying a higher rate, the property is just producing more. Now let's compare that to a higher revenue property. That same 18% on a property doing $150,000 a year is about $28,000 in new revenue. The owner comes out somewhere around $23,000 ahead, and your fee on that property is a little under $27,000 a year. And running the revenue strategy on it doesn't take 2.5 times the work that the $60,000 property takes, which is why I'd rather have 10 of these than the 47 units I had before, and it's probably not for the same reason that you guess. With arbitrage, anytime I wanted to grow, it meant more units, and every additional unit meant another lease, more cash out, more fixed expenses, and more that could go wrong. With this, you can go after a better property without taking on any more fixed obligations. Now, it's not that it's easy to land a big property because that takes a better prospecting and sales process, but it doesn't take more capital. So let's go back to one of the bigger mistakes that I made early on. I confused cash flow with wealth. When we were doing 6 figures a month across 47 units, I thought I was building something. And there's nothing wrong with that. Cash flow businesses are how most people get started, and they're how you get any money to work with in the first place. So the problem was never that it was a cash flow business. The problem was how much overhead I had to keep it running. I had 47 leases. Every one of those is rent due on the first, whether that property had a great month or it sat empty the entire month. Furniture I put on a credit card, crews I was paying, and none of that adjusts down when bookings drop. A business built that way only works while the money coming in stays ahead of everything you owe. So when the market shifted and I made a couple of mistakes on top of that, there was nothing there to absorb any of it. So when I rebuilt, I wasn't looking for a faster way to buy real estate. I was looking for the same kind of business, something that produces cash with as little overhead as possible in case things went sideways. And that's really what this model is. Ask yourself what you actually owe doing fractional hosting. There's no lease, there's no mortgage, you didn't buy any furniture, you don't have a cleaning crew on payroll. If an owner ends the partnership tomorrow, your expenses end with it because there were little to none in the first place. And that's not a small detail. That is created by design. Now, I'll be straight with you about the other side of that. Fractional hosting is not an asset. You're not building equity in anything, and it's not something that you sell in 20 years. It's a very simple cash flow business by design. But the way I look at it, that's exactly what you want first. The long-term wealth is in assets, and to buy assets, you need cash. And most people trying to get into real estate go get that cash from a bank instead of from a business. I mean, that's what I did, and if I had to do it all over again, I'd rather you have the money first. Now, before you get too excited, I do not believe this business model is for everyone. So here's a list of people that should avoid fractional hosting. Number one, if you're looking for passive income, this isn't that. It's a business. You're going to talk to owners, and a lot of them are going to say no. Number two, if you don't want to talk to people, this also isn't it. It's not just the property that needs you, it's the owner. It is as much of a sales and relationship business as it is a real estate business. And ultimately, 18% is an average, which means some properties come in above it and some come in below. You look at a listing and think you can move it 30% and it might move 8%. And so especially early on, assume that your first projection is optimistic and leave yourself a lot of room, because you're going to be quoting these numbers to an owner and you want to be under what you actually deliver. The real barriers here are having 20 conversations before one of them lands. Another is actually learning pricing instead of guessing, and building a track record before you go after bigger properties. Those are all real barriers. They're just different than coming up with $20,000 for another property. So before you go, don't forget to grab the free course. Links in the description and pinned in the first comment. It covers the fundamentals, what makes a property perform, which markets to look at, and where to find owners who are open to this. We've had more than 1,500 hosts that have gone through our program, and this is just a small piece of that. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.